Hello and welcome to this DWP Facebook Live event taking place for PCS tonight across 3 platforms, Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. You should like and share this as widely as possible, and then we can make sure it goes out as widely as possible. I'm Fran Heathcote, I'm the President of PCS, and joining me tonight will be Vice President Angela Grant and President of the DWP Group, Martin Kavanagh. We intend to hear from both speakers, and they will obviously cover the things that they want to talk about, and then we'll make sure there's much time as possible for any questions. So in the usual way, if you've got questions, feed them through to the admins, they'll feed them through to me, and we'll get through as many of those as we can. We don't intend to run for hours, so it's 6 o'clock now. We'll aim to get this done by just after 7. As I say, please send through any messages of solidarity, any questions, any comments, any observations. You're joining us at a really important time. 2 weeks tomorrow, and it will all be over and done with, and we won't have the opportunity to do more. So what we do in the next 2 weeks is going to determine where we go as a group and where the union nationally goes in terms of our national campaign. So really, really important meetings tonight. Really good opportunity to hear a bit of an update from our group officers, but also for you to make sure that you are fully equipped with all the information you need to get as many members as possible to vote in what will be, as I say, quite a pivotal ballot in terms of our group. So without any further ado, I am really pleased to introduce our first speaker. She is DWP Group Vice President Angela Grant, and Angela's going to address you this evening. So over to you, Ange.
Thank you, Fran, and thanks everybody for joining us this evening. Can't see the numbers, but I'm hoping we've got a lot of our members on to talk about. Obviously, you know, we're in the middle of the middle of the statutory ballot, and you know, to talk about the importance of us getting that vote, getting over that 50% threshold, so that we can continue the fantastic action that we have been taking. So, as Fran says, you know, I'm the Vice President of DWP Group, one of the Vice Presidents, and within my remit is bargaining, personnel bargaining, and I wanted to talk a bit about, you know, how important it is for us in the bargaining space to show that strength of the collective, because we know, you know, that we have the demands in the ballot. We're fighting on pay, which we have been for over a decade now, and under successive governments. We're fighting for better pay. We are fighting, you know, we're pressing to stop them taking that overpayment of our pension, that 2% of our pension, which, if they stop, would give us an extra 2% on our pay already, but also, you know, on average, £500 per year back into our pay packet. So we are fighting, you know, obviously, to stop that overpayment of our pension, you know, and we want to stop the attacks on our redundancy terms, because as they are, you know, we know that they are pressing to close offices. We've seen what's happening in DWP, pressing to close offices, and while they're doing that, they want to come after our redundancy and reduce the compensation by about a third. So everybody knows about those demands, but I want to talk about the importance of when we are in the bargaining space, when the department sees a strong union, when they see PCS at its strongest, they will capitulate more, they will give us more when we are bargaining, whether it is on, you know, annual leave, whether it's on attendance, whether it is on, you know, special leave for carers. All of those things that we are trying to win for our membership are better when we get past, you know, if we get past the 50% and we show that the members are right behind the reps that are in the meetings, doing those negotiations, in those consultation meetings. So we'll remember during COVID, during the pandemic, where members will recall that we held a consultative ballot when DWP were pushing to have late opening, coming up to the Christmas time when the pandemic, you know, people were dying in the pandemic. And the department wanted to push for late opening in the job centres, and they wanted to open on the Saturdays, and they wanted work coaches to bring all of the, you know, the claimants into the during the height of that pandemic. And we ran a consultative ballot to see if members wanted to, you know, take action on safety. And in that ballot, you know, we didn't quite hit the 50%. We didn't get the figures that we would want. But we took the strength of that. I think we had about a 78% yes vote. I think it was around 70% yes vote. And we took that figure and we said to DWP, this is what our members are ready to do. We've got 70% of our members that are ready to walk and to stop working during the pandemic. So they won't be keeping payments in place. You won't be able to talk about DWP on the news and how fantastic everything is, because we will be closing our offices if you do not keep our members safe. Off the back of that, we won work coach empowerment for the period of the high periods of the pandemic, and we stopped the late opening in those job centres. That was from what is possibly, I would call, pretty much a mini ballot. It wasn't a ballot of the whole union. It was a ballot of our job centre members, and the strength of those job centre members voting to give us that 70% plus helped us to win. You know, a number of years ago, we balloted for the AAs when the AAs were to be made redundant. We went out on the ballot and we won. Those AAs were not made redundant. And every single time we go out, every time we run a ballot, we win gains. We might not win everything, but we win gains. So this ballot that we have now, we've got a national ballot. And in DWP, you know, we know that government are watching. We know that they are waiting to see if we clear this 50% threshold on the 9th of May. All eyes are on the 9th of May to see if we get above that threshold. So we have to do it. We have to make sure that everybody is voting. But not only are government doing that, but our department will be sitting watching that. And they'll be waiting for us to go back into negotiations, and where we are losing, where they're coming after, you know, they're not giving us our pay, they're doing this with our pensions, they're coming after our redundancy terms. We will see the worst of policies happening in DWP if we do not clear that threshold. So I just wanted to make that point, that as well as us, you know, fighting for our national demands, every single group, the negotiating power that we have depends on us clearing this ballot. You know, a lot of the work that I do is in the equality space, and I don't want to sound like a one-trick pony, but it's really important, again, that we look at, you know, the equality needs of our members. So we do a lot of lunchtime meetings, and we have, you know, hundreds of people jumping on those lunchtime meetings because they know that the employer is not looking after them. So they come to their union to see how their union can help. The one thing that we need to do, if members want the union to help, again, give us that strength. But it's not just about those with equality needs, is it? It's not just about our members that are protected under the Equality Act. It is also about, the middle-aged white man who feels, what about me? I'm not protected by law in any way, shape or form here. So we can see the fight for those that are in the equality space, but what about me? What about, single people? What about young people who are not covered by the Equality Act? Single people that don't have children. There are so many that are not covered. So this ballot is important for everybody. It's not just about people that are covered by the Equality Act. I mean, of course, we have to have those protections, but this ballot is to protect every single one of our members, whether you are young, if you are old, if you are black, if you are white, if you are male, if you are female, if you are a trans member, no matter who you are, if you are sitting in DWP, if you are included in this ballot, then this fight is for you. It is also for anyone that sits outside of the ballot. It's not just for those that are within the ballot either, because every single employer group will be looking at the strength of PCS. We have a fantastic union. We have a fantastic strategy at the moment. This strategy, the targeted action that we are taking, is winning. We can see that government have already blinked. They've come back with that 4.5%. I'm not going to stray into what Martin's going to be speaking about, but they've already come back with the 4.5% for the following for this year, for this coming year. We want something for last year. We want more than 4.5%, and we want to make sure that we have the protections in place. We need the collective strength. We need to show that solidarity. We want to win up like those school policies, all of the policies that we won during COVID, the Black members risk assessment, all of the things that we can win if we show them that our members are behind the negotiators, because we are not PCS. We are the mouthpiece maybe of PCS, but we are not the union. It's every single person on this call that is PCS. So we are doing this for the members on this call. We need you to give us that mandate so that we can do the job that we know we can do with that strength. So there's not a lot more that I want to add to that, Fran. But happy to answer any questions, and just to, a further call out just to say, please, let's everybody, as Fran says, let's make sure that we wake up on the 9th of May and know that we have done every single thing that we can, and we are letting our reps know if we have voted, and we clear that 50% on the day. Thanks, Fran.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Ange. And, I think to pick up where you've just left off, let's not wake up in a couple of weeks' time and just wish we'd done that little bit more. I think what we do now is going to be so important. We know, don't we, that there've been the Easter break. We've got a couple of bank holidays coming up. Not every working day between now and the close of the ballot is going to be available to us. So we have to maximise every minute of every day that we can to turn that vote out, to, as Ange said, to make sure that we send the strongest message possible to the DWP. Okay, I'm going to read out some solidarity messages then from DWP West Wales, from Durham County Branch, from Ayrshire, Dumfries and Galloway, from Fylde, from the Dundee Pension Centre, from Birmingham North, from DWP TAF, from Edinburgh, Lothian and Borders, from DWP Tees Valley Branch, who say, let's stand up to these Whitehall bullies, from Mohammed Shafiq, proud to stand with you all, from Marie McDonough, solidarity to all strikers from the City of Sunderland Branch, from Bucks and Oxon, from HMRC Preston, so good to see some colleagues in the HMRC joined us tonight, DWP North East and Mid Wales Branch, from DWP Wirral, let's smash this second ballot and show the employer that we're up for the fight, from DWP Tyneside in Northumbria, from CM Pension Centre, thank you to all PCS members taking targeted action on our behalf. We're all joining you on Friday and we'll see you at the rally, so that's great. And then finally from North Staff's DWP branch. So a big range of solidarity shout outs there, and clearly a big part of this is knowing that none of us are on our own and that we've all got a big team that work with us to make sure that we can deliver. Okay, so I'm going to hand over now to our second speaker, who probably doesn't need a lot of introduction. He's your group president, DWP Group President Martin Kavanagh, and Martin is going to take you through a bit of an overview of everything that's going on. So over to you, Martin.
Thanks very much, Fran. And I just want to reiterate the points that you and Angela have made, and thanking everyone for attending tonight's meeting and the importance of where we're at in this national campaign. And I just want to really cover off a few points in starting, and that is that we know from the data that we've been collecting that your reps have been asking you, on a daily basis since the start of this ballot, have you voted yet? Have you voted yet? and from the figures that you are being given them, or the information you've been given to those reps, and they've been updating our PCS digital system, we know that we're currently in DWP there or thereabouts of exactly where we were in the last statutory ballot. And so the importance of the next few days and the importance of the next week in particular cannot be understated. We know, don't we, that last time round, for the first time in our history, we achieved an historic ballot result in DWP. We got over that 50% threshold for the first time since they've been introduced back in 2016-17. But we scraped over that 50% threshold. And what the figures currently show us is that we're roughly in the same page as we were back then. So literally every day will count and every vote will count. And I'm starting off there because Angela has outlined a number of the points why this is absolutely critical that we achieve a successful reballot, why we break through that 50% threshold again. And I'm just going to expand really on some of those points in terms of the context of where we're currently at with the national campaign. In terms of the national campaign, you will all know that since the results were initially announced last November for the first ballot, that we've been working hard as a union to identify those areas to take targeted and sustained industrial action, backed up by national action, preferably in coordination with other unions, when that can have the biggest impact and the most effect on both the UK government and our employers. And what we've seen during that period is not only a response to the historic yes vote that we delivered last November as a union, when we had initially 126 areas with a live mandate between then and May, not only the biggest ever yes vote that we've had in the national ballot, but in DWP, we have been working hard to identify areas where we can take that targeted sustained action. And I don't think it's unfair or over the top to suggest that the action that we've taken from November through to the current present day, where we see a whole load of PCS members and workers on strike currently. Passport Office is probably the highest profile example of strikers right now in PCS that are in the middle of a 5-week period of industrial action that is having a really hard-hitting impact on the UK government and is having a really hard-hitting impact on their employer and the services that we provide. And the reason why that's so important, and the reason that we've been able to take that record amount of industrial action from November through to now, has, as Angela quite rightly said, made the government blink already. Because we should not be under any illusion that regardless of what your individual or personal opinion is on whether or not 4.5% is better than the 2% or less that we've been used to, whether you believe that actually that is roughly what you're expecting, or whether or not actually you're disappointed with that offer, whether you believe that some of the other unions that have been, especially in the public sector, that have received similar offers, headline offers of 4.5% to 5%, were right or wrong to recommend acceptance or rejection, whatever they chose to do. But one thing that is undeniable is that the action that unions have taken, regardless of the sector, from last year through to this, and the action that we have been taking as a union from last year through to right now, has had an impact and has already forced concessions and forced a climb down from the UK government, but also employers in those various sectors. Because if it hadn't have been for the action that has been taken, if it hadn't have been for our ability to bring members out on a consistent rolling basis during this past period, there is no way, in our view, no way that the government would have agreed to the largest Treasury remit that we've seen for 20 years, and no way would they have agreed to giving us over double more what they were putting in place last year. In fact, we know from earlier discussions that their initial plan was to roll out forward the 2% that they imposed last year, again in 2023-2024 pay. So the action that we've been taking is working, but it's not enough. When we've got inflation still running at 10% plus, when food inflation, based on the figures that were declared last week, is running at between 15 and 16%, a 4.5% to 5% pay rise just does not cut it, does it? Our members are telling us still in their droves about the impact of the financial crisis is having on them and their families. You are telling us in great numbers about how you and your families are struggling. You are not making ends meet. You are having to choose no longer between heating and eating, like was the strapline for much of last year. You're now having to choose and prioritise which bills will be paid, which ones won't be. whether or not you can have 1 meal a day or 2 meals a day, or whether or not all of your family can eat. And at the start of this process, we've had a number of Facebook Lives event, and you know that DWP, our group, produced a 156-page dossier of testimonies last year that we presented to the Minister and we presented to the DWP executive team with some of the most harrowing stories you'll ever wish to read and hear. Well, we followed that up in the last few weeks with a DWP member survey. And the results of that survey will be getting launched in full tomorrow, and a press release will be getting issued just after midnight tonight. And what I can tell you is that those survey results are just as harrowing, are just as shameful as far as the DWP and the UK government are concerned as those testimonies were that we presented last September. Because when we have still record numbers of our members having to claim in-work benefits at the same time as paying out that benefit, when we have more and more of our members openly admitting that they've had to resort to using food banks, when we openly have members confirming that in their office they either have a food bank set up or a food share system set up, not for customers or for the most vulnerable visiting our job centres, but for workers and staff who work within those offices. When that is the level of information that we're getting from our members, we know that the problem is not only not going away, if anything, it is getting worse. And so our response, the public response to the Treasury remit, the insulting Treasury remit that we gave last week, the full opposition to that Treasury remit, and the reminder that our demand isn't 10% from a figure that is plucked out the air. It's 10% because it is that will give us a roughly inflation-proof pay rise right now, and it's that will at least give us an aspiration for our members to have a relatively decent standard of living. We are not being greedy. We are not asking for the earth. We are asking for a amount of payment and amount of money that will give us a level of decency in terms of our standards of living. But equally as well, the other issues that have already been covered tonight, the overpayments on pensions, the job insecurity, with thousands of our members across the civil service, but even in DWP, are facing the very real risk of losing their job and their livelihoods in the not too distant future. And of course, the despicable, vindictive threat that not only do they want to get rid of us potentially, but they want to do it on the cheap. All of these issues are absolutely critical for us to win on, and all of these issues can only be defeated if we continue to have that live mandate. And so I would urge every single one of you, if you haven't done already, to put the cross in the yes box in that envelope, return it on the ballot paper, return it in the envelope, get it in, post it by next Wednesday, the 3rd of May, to be safe and sure that it will get into the scrutineers by the 9th, and to send that clear, unequivocal message to the UK government and DWP that we are not going anywhere. But I would also remind comrades of this, that for us to get above what has already been put out there in the Treasury remit, we clearly are going to have to not only repeat what we did last year, which is smashing through that threshold, but we absolutely have to show the government and our employer that we are determined to escalate and increase that action. And that's why this week, in addition to you being asked to vote in the re-ballot and to make sure that you give us that live mandate again beyond the 7th of May, we want every single one of you this Friday to withdraw your labour, to not spend a single second either physically in the workplace or logging on your systems at home, to take part in that industrial action in the same way that you did on the 15th of March and previously on the 1st of February. We want the Friday the 28th of April to be as big, if not bigger, than those two previous national days of industrial action. And I can also tell you that last week we served notice on the DWP for 2 further periods of targeted sustained action with members in DWP. So from next Tuesday, the 2nd of May, through to Saturday the 6th of May, in the final week of our current live mandate, every single job centre in Glasgow is being brought out on strike as part of that targeted and sustained action. And 3 job centres in Liverpool around the Toxteth, Liverpool city centre area, as a result of the Toxteth office closure, will also be brought out for further industrial action next week. What that shows our employer, but what that shows our members as well, I hope, is that this group and this union is serious. It's not only serious about taking hard-hitting action, but it's about serious in continuing and escalating that action if we don't get our demands that are met. Because I just want to really finish with this. that we are entering an absolutely critical period for the ballot, yes, and for national campaign, yes. But I would go as far as saying that this is an absolutely critical period for our union. We have seen other unions take industrial action week on week, month on month over the past period with varied degrees of success. And they have forced concessions from the employers. They've forced concessions where the UK government was previously refusing to intervene. They've now forced an intervention. And whilst in most cases that hasn't resulted in an offer or a settlement that they are recommending to their members, they've made the government blink and move, and they've made their employers move. We've also done that. But we've done that while still being at the back of the queue. Because unlike other public sector unions, whilst we got a headline figure that was broadly the same, 4.5% to 5%, what we were not offered, like other public sector unions have been offered, was any additional money to make up for the last 12 months of financial hardship that our members have faced. So yet again, our offer is worse than those in other areas in the public sector, and our members quite rightly are angry about that. There's only one way we can continue to show how angry we are, and it is by you voting yes, returning the ballot paper, and making sure that we've got that renewed mandate through past the end of May. Tomorrow, I would urge every single one of you to keep an eye out for communications that we're going to issue around the DWP member survey. Keep an eye out for the press releases and media coverage, because I'm sure there's going to be plenty of that in the days ahead. But be very, very clear that we are now at the cusp of doing something that we have not done for 2 decades. If we can force the government like we have to increase their treasury remit in the way that they have, that extra push, that extra mandate for another 6 months, that clear determination from our membership and our union leadership that we will not only continue to take industrial action that will hurt them and will hurt them hard in the next 6 months, but we will escalate that industrial action during that period with that live mandate. It is that strategy, it is that determination that is going to force further concessions from this government. And we can be hopeful, we can be very, very hopeful that we have a government right now that, whilst it might be waiting to see what the result of this re-ballot is going to be, they are not in a strong position. They're in the weakest position that they've been for quite some time, and they clearly are feeling the heat and the pressure of the action that we're taking. We have an opportunity to win you the pay that you deserve, to have the money refunded to you that has been stolen from you since 2019 in your pensions overpayment. We have the ability to force concessions with real job security for our members, and we can make them rip up their proposals if we can on redundancy terms and reducing our redundancy terms if we are successful in this reballot, and we are determined in the weeks and months ahead. I know the group executive committee is. I know that you, our membership, are that determined and that angry still. So place a cross in the box, get the yes vote, give us the live mandate, go on strike this coming Friday, the 28th of April, and let us be clear. You have earned and deserve a better pay rise and a decent pay rise. You earn job security, you deserve job security, and you have absolutely earned the respect and dignity that is too often withheld from you by your employer. Vote yes on the ballot. Let's win on all of those things. Thanks, Fran.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin, and hopefully people have found that useful. Okay, I'm just going to run through a few more solidarity messages before I turn to the questions. And I think, as I said at the beginning, whilst this is the DWP meeting predominantly, it's great that we're getting solidarity messages from so many other groups, not least the HMRC, who, as we know, were recently balloted to join the action that took place in March and beyond, and therefore are not part of this reballot. So an extra special shout out to them, and thank you from HMRC Glasgow for your solidarity message to us. Also solidarity from the Office of National Statistics, that's really helpful, and from Pete Rofe, who says we stand with you. Solidarity from PCS Arms members in Stoke-on-Trent. And you might remember, many on this call will remember, that Pete was a branch secretary or branch officer, certainly, of the North Staffs branch that recently had to deal with the massive office closure at Hanley. So thank you very much for that message, Pete, and our best wishes to you. Solidarity from the National Museum of Scotland, from HMPO Durham, who we know in the middle of their campaign as well. And a message here from Catriona Kennedy: North, South, East, West, England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, all departments standing together no matter what, fight for our lives. And that, as I say, that's Catriona Kennedy. So thank you so much for all of those messages, and they do mean a lot. Solidarity from DWP Coventry and Warwickshire, from DWP Glasgow. And I think that is it for now. Okay, I'm going to turn to some questions and comments then. So if we could get perhaps Angela and Martin back on the screen, that would be helpful. That would be great. And what I'll do, I'll go through them in as many as I can get through anyway, and we'll see if we can get an answer to all of those. Okay, so Claire Schofield says, in our area, the majority of job centre staff have been taken on during COVID and are happy with their terms and conditions as it came from other jobs. They are earning lots of money on weekly overtime, so it's difficult to get them on board. Most of our EO members are in decision-making and fraud now, with no Saturdays and working from home. My team is 70% old school, and they do support the union. So that's, I think, more of an observation than a comment. But anything, Martin, that you want to sort of say there, because clearly Claire is representing a whole host of different members in different work areas, some of whom are working from home, some of whom have come from outside and think that actually the terms and conditions seem quite good. So why should they be part of our campaign?
Yeah, cheers, Fran, and thanks, Claire, for the observation and the question contained within it. I mean, I think that the simple reality here is that we clearly now have a workforce that fits into a number of different categories. Those that have been perhaps around that bit longer, have existing T's and C's, have understood and know the ongoing struggle, and the fact that it's not just that, bad pay and low pay is not a phenomenon that's just appeared in the last 12 months. This has been something that we've been fighting for and against for decades now. And the message that I would give to Claire, in terms of the message to those other newer members of PCS, but also to those members as well, is that the only reason that you've got terms and conditions that you think are better than what you've had previously, probably quite often you've come from areas that aren't union organised, in sectors that perhaps have 0-hour contracts or even lower salary bands than we do, and don't perhaps experience the traditional terms and conditions that we do. But the only reason we've got them is because for year after year, decade after decade, we as a union have shown that we are stronger when we are collective. We are, determined to fight for good and decent terms and conditions. And that right now, we are not only in the midst of a financial crisis, an economic crisis, but we've got a government and an employer that has shown all too often that they will whittle those terms and conditions down and even away. And they will come, as Angela said before in her contribution, the bonus that we can get from winning past this threshold isn't just on the national demands, although that clearly is what the focus is. The message it gives to the department is, you dare come after some of those other T's and C's, and we have a membership that is strong enough to fight. The opposite is also true, though, that if the department and the government believe that we can't deliver a new mandate and we can't have an industrial response and a strong response, then they clearly will think nothing about coming away. That the very fact that they are prepared to put in writing to our union that they want to review the redundancy terms and reduce it by 33% shows you how serious they are about cutting back on our T's and C's. So the message I would give to those newer members is, you've joined a union. Hopefully you've joined a union now that you can be proud of and that you are proud of. We've worked hard to get what you currently enjoy. Let's not throw that away by giving an open goal to the employer, and the government is only happy to strip away terms and conditions, working practices, as well as pay restraints. So that would be my message, Ron. Cheers.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you, Martin. Okay, look, there's 3 comments or questions, comments in a similar vein. I'm going to read them out together, and I'm going to ask both Martin and Andrew if there's anything you'd like to say in response. So John Mooney says, got some feedback from job centre members when I was doing the rounds last week. They state that managers have blocked out diaries in advance of Friday's strike action and were concerned that their striking would not have the desired impact. Diane Elliott says diaries have been blocked out for all strike days in Partick Job Centre, and I do feel this renders our action ineffective. And Melanie Bamborough says job centre managers are asking if you intend to strike because it's all about the diaries. So for those members who are seeing the diaries blocked out and therefore thinking that perhaps, you know, it will make the action less effective, what's the message, Martin?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'll answer the last one question first in terms of, you know, the department asking whether or not you're going to be on strike. I mean, our message has been consistent throughout every strike action, whether it's been targeted or the national action that all members have been taking part in. And that is that the department can ask, but you don't have to tell them whether or not you're going on strike on Friday. You can basically inform them. Clearly, you will inform them on the day or soon after, because if you want to be on strike and you are taking part of that strike action, because there'll need to be a deduction in your salary, but you don't need in advance to tell them that you're on strike. In relation to the other points, I mean, we've had this a lot, actually, not just in terms of the one-day action, but also in the initial phase of targeted action that we took. And we have a very clear view as a group executive and group officers that actually, by blocking those diaries out, that is not rendering your action pointless or meaningless or having no impact. The exact opposite is true. For years, we have seen in DWP almost like the holy grail on a day of strike action is if we can get to the department to shut and close a job centre or an office. And the reason that we always held that as sort of a holy grail and to such high esteem is that we all can, know of an experience where the department will bend over backwards, providing zero service to the public, but actually having one or two managers quite often parachuted in from neighbouring job centres or neighbouring offices, just so they can say the doors remain open and they didn't close the job centre that day. But they have been providing, and they do provide, zero quality service to the public. So every time a job centre is on strike, those work coaches and those other members of staff who are no longer working or providing work on that day aren't having no effect at all. They are having a massive impact on the job centre, on the diary system, and they are causing real disruption. Yeah. And the example of that I would give is that I attended a meeting a few weeks back with a member, speaking to a member who was based in a service centre, actually. And they confirmed that on the days that some of the Liverpool job centres have been out on strike, that rendered their workload or made their workload negligible, because the knock-on effect for those job centres being out was that actually the work queues and some of the work that was normally transferred into the service centres wasn't coming through to the same levels as well. So every time you go on strike, even if they block your diaries out, yes, the customers will still need to be seen at some stage. Of course they will, but that's always going to be the case in a benefit system like ours. But every time you go on strike, the impact is real. And we know it's real because the department run around like headless chickens trying to work out how they can backfill and cover for it. And so I would urge everyone to not be downhearted by it. Let them block your diaries out. You withdraw your labour. The effect and impact is on them and not on you. Okay,
thanks very much, Martin. Anything to add, Ange, or has that covered it?
Yeah, that's pretty much covered it. The only thing that I would say, Fran, is when they are blocking the diaries, as Martin says, the employer and the government, the minister knows that work is not being done, and they know that there are backlogs. So, of course, this is having an effect. But the only thing that I would want to say is, if those diaries were open and we had members on the picket line and we had claimants that would have to come along and cross over that picket line to go into an office to be seen by probably by a manager who doesn't have a clue what is going on and cannot help that person, I think that might have more of a detrimental effect, because it might cause a bit of angst between the customer that has to go in and the person that is on the picket line. So although it seems that it's not a good thing, it actually is a good thing, because we are stopping conditionality. You know, they can't go in and thank someone for not going in that day, but people don't have to go in that day. So I think, all in all, it's not an issue that those diaries not blocked, but I do know that members are struggle with that a lot of the time. Thanks, Fran.
Okay, thank you. Grace Bellaby from DWP Durham branch says if anybody from any of her sites has voted but hasn't told the branch yet, please join the branch Facebook group, the DWP Durham branch Facebook group, and let the branch know. So we'll pass that on. Thank you, Grace. Okay, there are a couple of questions here, Martin, again in the same vein that I think you probably want to take together. And it's probably quite good that this has come up, because clearly, you know, targeted action is not something that everybody's familiar with. And so it's good that these questions are coming out. So Lee McCartney says, DWP are in a 4-week recovery plan with service centre staff being asked to provide additional telephony cover. Now is the time to take targeted action. And Jackie Corner says, get the service centres out. If customers don't get paid, that will have a great impact. So again, those both questions around targeted action and the sort of submissions that we would look to support. So I'll hand over to you, Martin.
Yeah, cheers, Fran. And again, I mean, that is really encouraging, actually, because that's exactly what we've been trying to ask for and encourage over the past number of months, that we know that a department like our size, and it is the biggest government department, it's perhaps not as straightforward to bring our group of members out for targeted sustained action with full strike pay over a period of time that can have the same impact over that period as, say, another smaller government department. But what we would say is this, that the action that we've taken so far is having a big impact. So yes, there's been the headlines in terms of the job centres, but we've also brought out a few weeks ago our UC service centre members in Bolton, and also in Stockport as well. And the reason we did that is that we identified an area of work in particular that could be significantly impacted by bringing those members out for that period. And that was a hugely well supported and hugely successful few days of action by those two service centres. We've already started the process of identifying where else we can bring out in terms of service centres and other areas of DWP as well. But the truth of the matter is that our mandate now runs out in round about 2 weeks' time, and unless we renew our mandate, the discussion about where we would like to take out next will be a moot point, because we won't be able to legally take anywhere out on strike after the 7th of May if we don't renew our mandate. So I welcome those suggestions. I welcome from Lee, and I welcome the fact that members are thinking in the same way that we are about where we go next and how that can be hard hitting. But it's a moot point if we don't beat that 50% threshold between now and the 9th of May. So give us a mandate and let's work with members such as that and reps such as that to make sure that we target areas that continue to be hard hitting.
Okay, thanks very much, Martin. Okay, Bev Hopper says, what do they class as low paid? We're already on the minimum wage. You can't get much lower than that. And I think, Bev, that is a really good point. Sami Mulkai says, don't forget they told us there's no money for us. Then they checked their sofas and scraped 4.5% together just because we took some action. We have to continue with that action and get them back around the table with an offer to us that's not an insulting 4.5%. And Sammy, I think that is a point really well made. I think, Martin has articulated in some detail why, whilst on the face of it, when we're used to getting the crumbs off the table, it appears to be a little bit more generous than perhaps we've seen before. But that's in the context of inflation running at over 10% and no recompense whatsoever for the cost of living crisis, unlike any other public sector trade union that's been in dispute. So hopefully people, as you say, will recognise those points and make sure that they post their ballot papers. Okay, a couple of questions, not surprisingly, have come up about the employee deal. So I'm going to take those together, Martin and Ange, and then I'm going to ask either or both of you if you want to comment. So surely the DWP will have to address the fact that AAs and AOs are all on the minimum wage. and also differences in pay for those opted in or out of the employee deal. Will this impact on members in other grades? It absolutely will. There's no name on that, but clearly I'm going to invite Martin and Anne to comment in a minute. But just for whoever's posted that, yeah, you know, this doesn't just have an impact on the lowest grades, though clearly it does completely scupper the DWP's grading structure. It has an impact, a ripple effect on all of the grades. Okay. Yes, so Tony Bardley asks, I've asked this before and never had an answer. Why can't we take action against the employee deal, stop working late and stop working Saturdays? So Martin, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, no problem, Fran. I mean, in terms of the first point about the AOs on the national living wage, and if you like, the merging of the pay scales as a result of that national living wage, members will hopefully have seen the briefing that we issued very soon after that announcement was made by the department. And we have been very clear with DWP that they have to address that pay problem. It is inconceivable and untenable that we continue where we have two grades paid exactly the same amount of money, regardless of what the job that they do or the roles that they do, regardless of the responsibility that they have within those roles, and it makes a mockery of the grading system. It also, as well, is a reality now that because the national living wage is, if you like, caught up DWP pay, and that's what has happened there, then those who opted out of employee deal and those who opted in those lower grades, AA to AO, will again be on the same rates of pay. That is something that has to be addressed. That is something that the department themselves have acknowledged to us privately they need to address. But of course, they were hanging their hats on the Treasury pay remit, giving them scope and flexibility to be able to address that. Well, it doesn't take a genius to work out that with a pay remit, even with 4.5%, if you use that pay remit to try and address the anomaly between AA and AO, opted in and opted out grades of employee deal, you would probably blow the entire pay pot just on addressing that issue. And that's before you even started getting into genuine pay discussions around all the other grades and all the members, but also as well about a genuinely real cost of living rise for those lowest paid. So it's a point well made, and it's something that we'll need to continue to press home on. But again, everything points to the same issue here. The only way we're going to be able to successfully and properly address that and not impact on others' pay and everyone else's ability to get a decent pay rise is by us driving up that overall pay pot. It's got to be way above the 4.5% and closer to that 10% that we've been demanding. In terms of Tony's point, Fran, I mean, this is, you know, I generally get the question, and I generally understand why members think that way. That why don't we just, you know, strike over employee deal? I think there's a number of issues here. First of all, in terms of the ED contractual elements, clearly they are now just that, they are contractual elements. So it's not as simple as saying, well, we just won't work late, we won't work Saturdays. You know, it's even been suggested to the GEC that we should just withdraw from the employee deal and their collective agreement. Well, of course, the problem with doing that is that your contract of employment would still say the same. The rights that the department can have to enforce Saturday and evening working on you all will still be there. But what would be the safeguards and the protections that the ED collective agreement gives. So my message is this, that if we want to force the department's hand on better pay, addressing the low pay and the national living wage anomaly between AA and AO grades, but other grades as well that you rightly say will be impacted, the only way we can do that is by increasing significantly that pay pot. ED itself and balloting members for action, short of strike action, for example, that's not about a contract of employment. That doesn't help it in that scenario. The department can enforce your contract of employment on you. And if you've got a Saturday and evening contract, technically, they can ask you to work every Saturday. They could ask you technically to work, you know, every evening in a week. And I'm sure none of us would want that. So our view is we still bank the safeguard that we negotiated and we've got in place as part of that collective deal. But the real issue here isn't about the employer deal or the collective agreement. The real issue here is about the poverty pay being imposed on our department, and it's that we've got to fight against.
Okay, thank you. Ange, I'm not going to bring you in on this, but there are other questions that I will bring you in on. Okay, so question from Steve, which I think, Steve, in the interest of time, I can just address quickly. So I will be striking on Friday, but I have a question. Someone has run by me that a strike on a Friday won't count as 1 day from your day of service, but it counts as 3, including the weekend. Apparently, this used to be the case. Is it still the case? Steve, it absolutely isn't. What is correct is if you were to, for example, to call action on a Friday and action on the following Monday, then it is possible for the employer to withdraw, 4 days' pay in terms of the money from the Friday, the money from the Monday, and the days in between. But it's not the case that by taking industrial action on a Friday, you would lose more than 1 day's pay. It's when it runs over a weekend that with days in between, it becomes an issue. So hopefully that helps with that. Okay, couple of comments all in the same vein, which Ange, I'll ask you to comment on. So Louise says, can I suggest everyone in this audience posts on their personal Facebook to ask colleagues to return their ballot paper? We all have work colleagues amongst our friends list. If we all remind them that then we're all in this together, and I think that's really important. Tina Towers said, I'm getting the biggest pay rise this month just to bring my pay up to the minimum wage. It's disgusting. And Nicola Leeming says, I've worked in the civil service for over 20 years. The pay rise has been an absolute joke, and it's about time we showed this government that enough is enough. So thank you for that, Nicola. Andrew, is there anything you want to say generally in terms of, in particular, Tina's point about the disgraceful thing of the biggest pay rise being to get her up to what is now the minimum wage?
It's an absolute disgrace, isn't it? I think we've got, there are so many of our members, I'm not going to go into the figure, but so many of our members that are now sitting on the minimum, the minimum living wage. And what that means is we have an employer that is only paying its staff what they legally have to. What an absolute disgrace that we have got a department that should be the exemplar of employers who are trying to get people into employment that are and this is the example that they are setting for other employers to have their own staff sitting on minimum wage. And it's not just one grade, has been said, it's the AO and the AA grade. So I totally agree with Tina. And in saying that, I'll go back to, I think it was the first question that said, we've got new staff coming in, they think they're on quite, they're on a decent wage, and they think that things are not so bad, and they don't think that we might need to strike. If we are looking at new staff that are coming in, if they were to look at the figures and see that on average we are £2,500 below where we should be had we kept it pace with inflation. If they've already cut our pay in real terms by £2,500 and they have seen AAs and AOs on the minimum wage, where does that leave others if we continue in this vein? Now, even as Martin says, if we were to get this 4.5%, that is going to go nowhere to addressing the issues that we have. So I'll say hello to Tina, because I do know Tina quite well as well. But thank you for that question, Tina. A really important point. But exactly what Martin has said and Fran has said, this is why we have to clear this threshold. We have to tell every single one of our members, tell every one of our friends to be returning that ballot paper. Let your reps know, because we have got members. It's not a cliche. We have got members that have no food in their cupboards. They cannot feed their families. They cannot put money in their gas and their electricity meter. They're having their broadband cut off, so they cannot work from home. So it's an absolute disgrace. It's an abhorrence, and we need to clear that mandate so that we can start to address some of those issues. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Ange. Okay, solidarity from DWP Sheffield and from Brodie J in Pontypridd. Lisa Crundwell says we need so much more than the 4.5%, which just replaces the UC I'm eligible for on the poverty wage. So unless we get closer to 10%, I'm actually getting a pay cut. Single, no kids, just paid a pittance for what is often a 40-plus hour week. Please keep fighting the fight. And Russell asks, what will happen in DWP if we don't meet the 50% threshold in this ballot? Russell, if that were to happen, and at the moment we've got a long way to go in the time we've got left, we are weakened in every set of negotiations we take part in, whether they're DWP specific or national. If we send a message to our employer and to our government that our members are not prepared to put a cross in a box, that weakens us more than almost anything else we could possibly do. So I think our task, and I say our collectively for everybody who's joined us this evening, is to talk to every colleague we know and every friend we have to make sure that we're not in that position come the 9th of May. Okay, Pam Dobbins says, I'm on my max, so I have pay freezes. I've had pay freezes for many years, and when I actually do get a rise, it's no more than 1.5% or 2%. I wonder how I afforded things years ago that I can't afford now, and then it dawned on me that it's because my pay has not kept pace with all other prices. Pam, that really just sums it up, doesn't it? And exactly what we've been saying. Okay, Jenny Pollard says, in regard to blocking diaries, ministers measure performance on weekly, fortnightly, mandatory attendance, and most job centres cannot meet this target during weeks where one-day action is taken. So for those people who are saying, what impact does it have? That really articulates, what the situation. Okay, so Steve West says there are members on the surge team in Edinburgh who have been told they may be asked to cover first commitment meetings for claimants in Glasgow during the strike action next week, and they don't want to do this. So, that's again a big sort of impact. Okay, Alan Clitheroe, have we formally rejected the 4.5 to 5% offer? In short, no, because it's not an offer. At the moment, what that is a remit. That remit is then communicated to departments who then enter in, because pay is delegated, they enter into departmental negotiations. So although we have notified the Cabinet Office that we are not prepared to enter into delegated or departmental talks, because clearly these issues can only be resolved nationally, we haven't formally rejected that percentage offer, because that offer hasn't as yet been made. It is purely the announcement of the remit that the Cabinet Office has so far done. Okay, Anne asks, what's happening about general civil service collective bargaining? Is this still being pursued? Absolutely, but clearly it's not something that the government are likely to welcome with open arms, because clearly, it suits them to divide us under delegation. And if you have delegated pay bargaining, it's far harder, isn't it, to bring everybody up to a level. So we have always campaigned for a return to what we call national pay bargaining, and making sure that no matter which department you work for, there's pay parity, including challenges that we've pursued legally, and that's something that we are still actively pursuing. So Martin, I'm going to bring you in on this one. Stuart from North Merseyside asks, why did we not go for action short of a strike on the new ballot paper? If we win this new ballot, and we all hope we do, we're then locked into another 6 months of just strike. Do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, cheers, Fran. And Stuart. I mean, just in terms of that, I mean, we will not be locked into another 6 months of just action, strike action, if we win this mandate. What the NEC's position is that rather than imposing a second question on the ballot for everyone for action short of strike action, then we believe, or the NEC believes, it was right for each group and each employee group to decide whether or not they could mount effective action short of strike action, because depending on where you work and what your role is, action short of strike action can mean very different things. I mean, the obvious thing is like an overtime ban. Equally, work to rules can be effective, but it depends what your job is, where you work, as to the effectiveness of those things. So the NEC's position is that groups should decide when and if to request a separate ballot for action short of strike action. We so far have resisted that in DWP, because the feedback we've had from branches and indeed from many members is that it would be mixed, if we're being honest about it, that we might potentially get past the threshold for action short of strike action, but it doesn't mean necessarily we'll be able to deliver meaningful action short of strike. And by that, I think we should always be mindful and very clear is that when we take action, whether it's strike action or it's action short of strike action, we do it so it can have the maximum impact. We don't do it just to protest or feel good about ourselves. We do it so it can be hard-hitting and actually achieve what we want it to achieve. We're to be convinced at this stage that we can deliver that in DWP, across DWP, with action, short strike action, but we keep it under review.
Okay, thank you. A few observations here. Lee McCartney says, Aldi have just given their staff the 3rd pay rise in 12 months last month, now earning £11.40 an hour. Honestly, it's tempting. Tracy Steele says, I'm an AO decision maker in the GMG, but I would earn more money stacking shelves in Aldi. And as Lee has just pointed out, that's probably true, Tracy. I've worked for DWP for 42 years, says Mandy Dickinson, and end up on the minimum wage. It's absolutely shocking. Marie McDonough points out around 25,000 staff in DWP and 19,000 in the HMRC falling below the living wage, and many claiming universal credit. And that is just the reality, isn't it, of the DWP right now, and why this campaign is so important. Okay, Jackie Corner says, I'm worried that members will think 4.5 is a good offer and then won't bother to vote. So again, really, really important that we get the message out there that whilst it may be, as I say, slightly better than the crumbs off the table that we've seen previously, when you put that into the context of nothing for the cost of living crisis, unlike any other public sector union, and in fact, inflation running at 10%, hopefully people will see why this is an offer that's not acceptable. We're getting to the end of our time, so I'm going to read out the last 2 or 3 questions / comments and invite Ange and Martin to respond, but also make any points they want to in terms of summing up. And then I think that will probably be where we need to leave it. So John Mooney says, perhaps a collective grievance. Imagine over 20,000 AOs requesting to be downgraded on the grounds that as they're on the same money as their AA colleagues, why should they have the extra responsibilities? Michelle says, makes me wonder why I work. Mentally exhausted at times, I would be better off claiming universal credit and disability benefit. # keep fighting. Alan Clitheroe said, post office unions apparently accepted a 10% pay rise. Why are we bottom of the public sector? That should be incentive enough to vote again to continue our action. And Karen McPike says, will we be asked to cover virtually for striking colleagues in Glasgow? And must we do this? So I'm going to invite Angela and then Martin to sum up. So in terms of anything I've just read out, including Karen McPike's question around covering for striking colleagues in Glasgow, which I think Martin will probably want to pick up. Ange, is there anything that you would like to come back on?
Yeah, just a couple of points, Fran. And first of all, just to say thank you to everybody that's come onto the call and, brought your contributions, and for the fact that we know now that you can go away and you can tell your friends, tell your colleagues exactly what this was about, and to watch over, because this will be recorded, so you can always watch over it. But when we look at this minimum wage and we talk about, we would be better off better off on universal credit. How many of our members are on universal credit? We've got over 40,000 members that are claiming the benefit that we have to deliver. And when you look at that, nobody's better off on universal credit. Nobody has ever been better off on benefit. But we do sometimes revert back to how it was on legacy benefits, when you would get a little bit of money to live on. You'll be able to claim something, for your children, if you needed a bed, if you needed a wardrobe. There is nothing there for anybody that is on benefit anymore. And anybody that is that is working and receiving universal credit still has to have, they still have a commitment. They still have to, explain why they're working part-time hours, why they're not doing more. And we have members that are having to come to their own employer, DWP, to say, I need more hours. Why can't I work more? When they can't, because they're actually working part-time, because they have reason to be working part-time. This is an absolute shambles. The whole system is an absolute shambles. So can't stress enough how important it is for every single one of us. John mentioned, shall we go for a collective grievance? This ballot is our collective grievance. Voting in this ballot is the way that we can deal with all of the issues. If we do not get past that 50%, it puts us right on the back foot, and they will come after everything that we have got. They will stop at nothing. And I cannot stress enough how important it is for us to all get that cross in the box, get the ballot paper posted back, and tell every single one of our friends and our colleagues, you know, if your family are working in the department, everybody get that ballot paper in. And even those people that say, I don't want to strike, put a no, you know, put the cross in the no box if you have to. Just make sure you are returning that ballot paper, because every paper that is not returned will go as a vote for government. They will say that we are voting, that, you know, if we get 45%, they will say 55% of civil servants are saying that they agree with government, and that is not the case. So we have to make sure we are returning those ballots so we get that mandate. Thanks, Fran.
Thank you very much, Ange, and thank you for covering those. Okay, Martin, any closing remarks from you, but also anything that you want to say in response, in particular, I think, to Karen McPike's question?
Yeah, no problem, Fran, and thanks for that. I mean, just two things in response to the questions. First of all, I actually quite like John's suggestion about the collective grievance. So let's go away and look at the feasibility of that. But Angela's spot on. Our collective agreements is this re-ballot. Let's make sure that we get past that mandate and that threshold and give us the mandate. That is the best collective grievance we could ever wish to have. But in terms of the cover for the situation in Glasgow, I mean, we've obviously been experiencing this in the most recent times with other action, targeted action that has happened elsewhere in the country. And what we've been able to get the department to commit to is that the only staff who from other districts or indeed other offices who aren't on strike, who will be asked to cover, are those who volunteer to do so. We would expect the same approach to be taken within Glasgow. And I know from speaking to the reps in Glasgow that has been muted to them today. So we are looking into that and we'll get onto it. Further advice will be issued by the end of the week on that one, Karen. But the position that's been taken elsewhere is that only volunteers should be covering for those officers that are taking targeted action, and we would expect that to be rolled out across Glasgow next week. So in terms of just closing, I just want to repeat the point. Thanks everyone for your attendance tonight. I know it'll be a long day for you, but I hope you appreciate and agree that actually this is as important as it gets right now, because we are in such a crucial moment for our campaign, for our union, and for you, our members. I want to give solidarity from the DWP group to every single PCS member taking strike action in other groups this week and into next week. Let's make Friday, the 28th, absolutely huge. Let's be proud of ourselves. Let's make it a real day of action and resistance and send that clear message to the government and to our employers that we are not just going to sit back and take it. We are going to fight for the better pay that we've earned. We're going to fight for job security. Make sure that you return your ballot paper. As everyone said tonight, yes, there's a theme, but we want to apologise for that. Get that yes vote on the ballot paper, return it in the envelope, and let your rep know as soon as you've done it so we can mark you off on our records. And the final thing is, let's deliver the mandate. We have the strategy for the first time in 2 decades that is having a real impact, is making the government rethink their own strategy and is forcing the government back already on concessions. But those concessions have not been enough. We want real negotiations at national level, not delegated down to the departments where they can water down and minimise the effectiveness. We want national negotiations based on a proper pay remit, with real job security on the table, with our pension justice intact, and then withdrawing their proposals on the redundancy terms. So go away, vote yes in the ballot, return it, let your reps know that you've voted, and strike on Friday, because we are on the cusp of something big.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. And Martin doesn't really mean go away. He means please go to your nearest post box and post your ballot paper. Okay, in closing, a couple of questions that I'll just cover off so that we get to everything that's been sent. Just to prove Stuart's point around, you know, and Martin's response around the action short of a strike. For everybody that thinks that might be a good idea, somebody else will not agree. Suzanne Kevin has said, I don't think overtime bans and working to rule work in the DWP. I've already seen staff who've gone on strike and then worked overtime in the same week. These are the issues we need to weigh up in terms of, you know, would that be a suitable group response? And just to clarify for Mandy Curran, who says, will you still be looking at turnout branch by branch in order to take individual office action if we don't go over the line in the whole group? Unfortunately, Mandy, it doesn't work like that. We are balloted on an employer basis. So in order to be able to, anybody in the DWP to take action, the whole of the DWP has to beat the 50% threshold. It wouldn't matter if your branch got to 90 or 95%, unless the group as a whole beat that threshold, we will not be taking action. So what we, as to finish where I started, what we do in the next couple of weeks determines everything that happens in this group and nationally for the period ahead. So as Martin and Anja very eloquently said, please do all you can to make sure we don't wake up on the 10th of May and wish that in this group we've done a little bit more. Get in touch if you've got any concerns, anything you're not quite sure of, or anything where you think you need a bit of help and support. That's why we're here, so that we can all work together to make sure when this ballot closes on the 9th of May, we have a result that we're all very, very proud of. Thank you so much for your attendance tonight. Thanks for your questions. I think we did get through pretty much all of them. And please keep in touch with us. As Martin and Anja both explained, the DWPGC will work closely with all of you in all of your branches. So if you have any concerns at all, get in touch. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your evening.